Spirit of life and love, God of our understanding, deep and abiding mystery, we pray now for those things that we take for granted, those things that we don't think about until they're gone. We pray for the warmth of our homes. We give thanks for heat and power and light. This morning's reading comes from a report from the Unitarian Universalist Association by its Commission on Appraisal. The Commission on Appraisal is a group that is invested by the congregations of our association to periodically look at different aspects of congregational life. And this report that they generated last year was called Who's in Charge Here? And it formed a lot of the basis of my thought on last week's sermon and this week's as well. And it was an examination of the role of power and authority in our congregations. What power and authority lay leaders have, what power and authority ministers have. And part of what the Commission on Appraisal did was to look at the historic and cultural context in which our congregations exist and have existed. And so this is a brief excerpt from their report. In the pre-colonial and colonial periods, American culture was influenced by self-sufficiency and living in small, often isolated communities. The period of national expansion brought the ideal of the rugged individualist, the strong and healthy male who was the captain of his life and the solo pilot in his social and economic affairs. These individualists believed in personal liberty, self-reliance, and limited interaction with institutions. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, an era of industrialization, United States culture was impacted by the free market economic system, strong profit goals, and maximization of individual wealth. Individuals rejected interference by government and support by institutions, including churches. An ethos of solidarity and collaboration was undermined by the belief that hard work alone determined a person's success and social worth, rather than inherited wealth and property as the markers of class privilege. Some of these rugged individualists were free thinkers who were associated with Unitarian or Universalist congregations. Their radical individualism often impeded the efforts of ministers and progress toward beloved community. We continue to experience the impact of rugged individualism in Unitarian Universalist congregations today. And so we will look in a little while at the role of the individual in our faith communities and how they've been influenced by our history in this culture. If you were here last week, you heard me talk about the feeling of freedom that we get when we first walk into a Unitarian Universalist congregation. When we discover that we're not required to subscribe to a certain set of beliefs to belong. How here we don't just allow but encourage everyone to discover truth and meaning for him or herself. Here, as I said last week, we are our own religious authority. And it's up to each of us to piece together our understanding of the meaning of our lives. We are accountable only to ourselves for how deep we want to go with our spiritual explorations. That freedom is even codified, if you will, in our fourth principle of our Unitarian Universalist faith, which says that we affirm and promote the free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Much of the focus of Unitarian Universalism is on the freedom and the individual, and the freedom of the individual, on our individual spiritual journeys, on the fact that we accept people, each person, just the way they are. The first principle of our faith tells us that we promote and affirm the inherent worth and dignity of each person. Everyone is different, everyone is unique, everyone is beautiful and perfect and wonderful, just the way we are. Well, maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration, but you get the idea. Every individual, we believe, has worth and value and is deserving of respect. This emphasis on the individual is deeply embedded in our liberal tradition. As I've noted before, ours is a history of heresy and heretics, people who diverged from the mainstream, who resisted going along with the crowd. Our early Unitarian forebears rejected the prevailing trinitarian doctrine of the day, and we hold up heroes like Michael Servetus and Francis David as role models. Then, when the American Transcendentalist movement came along, we broke away from the teachings of the Christian Church, claiming our individual agency in all matters religious. The Transcendentalists gave us permission to find religious authority beyond the Bible and outside the Church. They affirmed the truth and value of individual spiritual experiences, those transcendent mountaintop experiences that make up such a large segment of our religious authority today. As you heard in our reading from the Commission on Appraisal, this emphasis on individual agency and authority has been reinforced by the culture in which American Unitarianism and Universalism matured. They wrote, in the pre-colonial and colonial periods, American culture was influenced by self-sufficiency and living in small, often isolated communities. The period of national expansion brought the ideal of the rugged individualist. Some of these rugged individualists, they wrote, were free thinkers who were associated with Unitarian or Universalist congregations. And then, in the mid-20th century, the humanist movement took hold in our congregations. It was extremely influential in Unitarian and Universalist and UU congregations, further affirming the power of the individual to find meaning and to address social concerns, this time without the need for belief in a creator or in a divine source. I think it's fair to say that this ethos of the rugged individualist is deeply embedded in our congregational culture, and it's reinforced by our emphasis on our personal spiritual journeys. And yet here we are sitting together, worshiping communally. Something that we do on a pretty regular basis. And while many of us don't make it here every single Sunday, a lot of us do. The Sunday morning service is seen by most as the central communal activity of the church. This thing that we call worship, or sometimes Sunday service, is kind of a curious thing. What brings us out on a snowy Sunday morning when we could be snug and safe at home? What calls us here to do this thing that I call church? I say it's a curious thing because in worship we sit together, and yet we're in our own little bubbles, taking in what's going on, interpreting what we hear and what we feel for ourselves. Although we're surrounded by people, we're alone. We sit together, but also apart. It's a communal experience, but it too is highly individualized. If you think about it, there are really only two communal aspects to our worship experience, and I'm excluding those of you who feel compelled to chat during our collection. But we sing together, blending our voices to create something fleeting and beautiful and evocative. And we also hold hands during our benediction. Sometimes we stare down people whose cell phones are going off. But we hold hands during our benediction. And I'm always touched and amused by the giggles and the smiles and the laughter that fills the sanctuary when I invite people to hold the hands of their neighbors. It may be a feeling of relief because we know the service is finally coming to an end, but I think it's something else. In that act of reaching out and touching each other, physically touching each other, we're breaching the boundaries that we've been sitting in for the hour. We're bursting that bubble that contained us. It's not just a church bubble either. It's a bubble that we're probably working in and walking in through most of our lives. Here, at the end of our worship service, is the one place where we let someone we don't know at all, or maybe just know a little bit, reach out and actually touch us. Where else would you reach out and take a stranger's hand? I haven't tried it, but I doubt if I invited everyone standing in the line at the grocery store to take each other's hand that I'd be very successful with that. And the fact that we do that here says a lot about who we are and what we're about. We are a place that encourages us to reach out, a place that creates the trust that's needed to take that risk. This sanctuary, this church, is a safe space. And unless it's flu season, when I invite you to take a neighbor's hand, you can count on the fact that you won't be rejected. And so here, we are called to our individual faith journeys, to discover and take the path that leads us to our own understanding of truth and meaning. But there's more to Unitarian Universalism than that. Because here we're also called to take each other's hand. And not just at the end of our Sunday service, but every day. Unitarian Universalism is about our individual search for truth and meaning, but it's also about creating beloved community. We are not simply individuals. We are individuals immersed in community. We are one, but we are not only. Think about that. We are one, but we are not only. This church is a place where you can be fully yourself among and amidst others who are being fully themselves. We honor and respect each other as individuals, yet we're not individualistic. And what I mean by that is that we cherish each and every person here for just who and what they are, and we are prepared to offer ourselves up for the benefit of others. Because we know that what touches one touches all. That we are, as Dr. King reminded us, caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. While the seventh principle of our faith is often seen as an environmental ethic, I see it as a deeply theological statement. That principle affirms our connection to each other and to all that is. It calls us to affirm and promote respect for the interdependent web of which we are all a part. And I'll be the first one to admit that this is really hard to pull off, this idea that we are very individualized and we're also living together in community. Because the path that I'm on isn't necessarily the path that you're on, or I might be at the base of the mountain while you're near the top. Sometimes it might seem like we're talking different languages to each other. So how can we maintain our individuality at the same time as we maintain the vitality of our community? What is required of us in our interactions with each other? It starts, I think, with a willingness to be authentic, to be who we are and not to try and be someone we think others want us to be. As it's been said, you've got to be yourself because everyone else is already taken. When I say it starts with being authentic, it means not striving to put on that show that we sometimes put on, where we appear totally competent, totally together, perfect in every way. That's not what we expect of people here. We are all perfect in our imperfections. We don't need to wear those masks that we often wear out there with our coworkers or maybe our families, our bosses. We don't need to hide our flaws, because the truth is that we're all stumbling around in the dark just trying to figure things out. And so once we're ready to be authentically us, we've got to be ready to be vulnerable. This is the second piece, to be vulnerable. To actually share our inadequacies, our doubts, our questioning with each other. We've all got them. We've all got them. So to be authentically part of this community, we've got to risk some self-revelation. This is the reaching out part, the metaphoric reaching out like we do at the end of our service, the breaking through of our bubbles and our barriers to make real connections with each other. To be an authentic individual within an authentic community, we need to go beyond that idle chit-chat of Sunday morning coffee hour and have real conversations with each other. We need to discover the common bonds, the common concerns that we share, and discover also and become enriched by our differences as well. When we risk real conversation, we realize that we're not alone. That's where real community begins to emerge. Every Sunday, I ask our worship associates to reveal themselves through their reflections, as you heard from Sandra this morning, talking about her singing. I ask them to be authentic and to be vulnerable with the congregation. I ask them to take a risk and try to build a bridge between themselves and those who come. That's how we know that they are real, that there are meaningful things that they struggle with. To be an individual within community, we all need to do that with each other. Without risking vulnerability, all our relationships will be superficial and will never make the real connections that are the hallmark of genuine, beloved community. You may have read my column in this month's newsletter. I posed the question, what's new? And I talk about how oftentimes we just pass that off as a casual question. But what if we were to ask each other and genuinely be interested in the answer to the question, what's new? What's new in your life? What's going on with you? That is where community begins. So you have to be authentic, you need to be vulnerable, and here comes perhaps the hardest part of all. Once we are in real relationship with each other, we've got to love each other. We've got to love each other. We've got to allow each other to get under each other's skin. And sometimes the hard part isn't so much the loving of someone else, it's allowing ourselves to be loved, to be cared for, to be held in the loving arms of this community. Because it means that we trust. That we trust that we're not going to get hurt or disappointed or let down. And all of us who have opened up our hearts this way have been hurt before. A long time ago, I like to think it was in the earliest faith communities in human history, someone said, we don't have to like each other, but we need to love each other. Loving each other means assuming goodwill in each other. It means trusting that others are acting in the best interest of the community and not their own personal interests. It means staying at the table when someone hurts or disappoints us or disagrees with us. Because in authentic community, hurts happen. Hosea Ballou, an early Universalist minister, wrote, "If we agree in love, there is no disagreement that can do us any injury. But if we do not, no other agreement can do us any good." Finally, to be individuals embedded in true, beloved community, we must allow the community to exercise its power on us. By this, I don't mean relinquishing our free will or sitting back and letting others do all the hard work. On the contrary, to maintain a vital religious community such as this, that's the last thing we want. Our community needs us. It needs us to do the work of the church, to make the coffee and shovel the sidewalks and put on the fundraisers and serve on the board. When I say that we must allow the community to exercise its power on us, it's not about its power over us, but its power on us. I mean that we need to open ourselves up to being changed by our involvement in and our connection to the community and all its members. To being changed by our service to the community. To being changed by being one of a group of people who are working to transform themselves and the world. The goal of this religious community is not to stamp out cookie-cutter people, everyone made from the same mold, marching in lockstep, reciting a litany of the same beliefs. The goal of this community is to help you become the best you that you can be, and then to encourage and empower you to take that you out into the larger world and make it the best world it can be. Allow the power of the community to exercise its power on you. It is a tricky business, this task of maintaining our individuality and our diversity within a community. But when it happens, when we bring our authentic selves to the table, when we are open and vulnerable with each other, when we build bonds of trust and love, well, that's when the magic happens. That's when we discover the life-saving power of this place. That's where, as Starhawk told us earlier in our opening words, we find strength joining strength to do the work that needs to be done, arms to hold us when we falter, a circle of healing, a circle of friends, someplace where we can be free. This day and every day, I wish you peace. Amen.
Our closing words this morning come from educator and activist Parker Palmer. Palmer discovered this definition of community while living at Pendle Hill, the Quaker retreat center just down the road from here. He tells us, "Community is the place where the person you least want to live with always lives. And when that person moves away, someone else arises immediately to take his or her place." Isn't that the truth?